Students, today's lecture, I'm going to talk about the various types of governments that exist in the world, then get into our type of government and some discussions about some of the ideals or what our government is based on, what we need to make our government work. So the first thing I want to go over are types of government. The first type is something called an authoritarian type of government. The authoritarian government, it is highly concentrated. It has centralized power. Power is usually maintained by political repression. This means that there is a deprivation of civil liberties. When I say civil liberties, can you think of any civil liberties that we have in the United States? Protections, any things that we have that the government cannot take away from us will be our civil liberties. Right, it would be things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, search and seizure. The government cannot perform an unreasonable search. We have the right to a trial. We have the right to a trial by jury. We have the right to counsel, so we have the right to an attorney. These are all civil liberties that we have. In the authoritarian government, they will repress, they will ignore these civil liberties. They may exist on paper, but the government doesn't care. Decisions are made by officials without input from the people. This means the government is going to make decisions that are going to benefit the government, and they really don't care if it helps the people or what the people have to say, what the citizenry, the constituents. So it fails to serve its constituents. It fails to serve the people that it is supposed to represent. An example of this would be China. An example of the authoritarian government would be China. The Communist Party is the only choice. Government will discourage political discourse. They will discourage political discussion. We see China has done this. The Chinese government has banned Facebook. They've banned Twitter. They've done this as a means to prevent people from having political discussions or from even planning political meetings. Totalitarianism. In a totalitarian government, the state recognizes no limits to its authority, and it attempts to regulate every aspect of private and public life. This is the harshest types of all government. An example of this could be modern day Iran. Democracy. A democracy differs from the other two types of government, from the authoritarian and from the totalitarian, because in a democracy, we have a constitution that limits the power of the government. So we do have something to place a limit on the government. It has a list of can do or cannot do, if you will. Now, there are two types of democracies. The first is a direct democracy. In a direct democracy, everybody gets to participate. Everybody has a voice. Now, in the second type of democracy, and I want you to be careful here, because you will hear people say, the United States, we're not a democracy. We are a republic. They have just enough information to not know what they're talking about when they say this. The second type of government, the second type of democracy, has three different names. Yes, one of them is a republic. However, the other two names, representative democracy and an indirect democracy. We have a representative democracy and an indirect democracy. So all three names, they are the same type of thing. People tend to use the word they were taught. I was taught indirect democracy, so I use indirect democracy. In an indirect democracy, the people elect officials. We elect representatives who make the governmental choices for us. So in a direct democracy, we are voting directly. We ourselves are voting on laws, on new ideas. In the indirect democracy or the representative democracy or the republic, we elect officials to do this. But these are both democracies. Autocracy. Autocracy is a government in which one person has uncontrolled or unlimited authority over others. An example of this would be a traditional monarchy. It would be a king or a queen. Their word is law. Nobody can override them. You live, you die, you serve at the whims of the monarch. Oligarchy. An oligarchy is a form of government in which all power is vested in a few persons or in a dominant class or clique. So an example of an oligarchy would be 20th century South Africa. Power was given to a certain race. Political power was given and was held by whites. The last one, theocracy. Theocracy, the government of a state is led by immediate divine guidance or by officials who are regarded as divinely guided. So the government of a state is led by immediate divine guidance or by officials who are regarded as divinely guided. So in a democracy, the government or the head officials are thought to be led directly by whichever deity, whichever god they worship. Two examples. First, I'm going to double dip here. Iran, you can separate into two categories. You can separate into political and religious. But the religious category, the highest position is called the Ayatollah. And they have total control over the religious branch, but they also have control over the government branch. If you want anything done in government, if you want to run for an office, you have to ask the Ayatollah and get their blessing. The second example I'm going to use is Vatican City, the home of Catholicism. The official head of Vatican City is the Pope. When it comes to religious matters, it is said he is infallible. He is divinely guided. He can make no mistakes. He is led directly by the Christian God. Democracy in the past. Today, we do not have any direct democracies anywhere in the world. Have we ever had them? Have they ever existed? The closest we've ever come to a true direct democracy has been ancient Athens. So it's been a number of years. Ancient Athens had a formal constitution, so it limited the amount of power that the government had. And remember, in a direct democracy, everybody votes, everybody participates, all the citizens are eligible. And the government of ancient Athens did encourage participation. It encouraged participation by widely granting citizenship. And this, it sounds good, but this is where I say this is the closest we've came. To be a citizen in ancient Athens, you had to meet two criteria. You had to be a free and you had to be a man. So you had to be a free man. If you were a free man in ancient Athens, you were given citizenship. You are allowed to participate in government and participate in politics. So I said this is the closest, but women could not participate. Slaves could not participate. How do they encourage participation? In ancient Athens, we had a total of about 40,000 citizens. So let's just do this as something we can look at today. So average, 20,000 were above average, 20,000 are below average. This is what average means, right? Well, in ancient Athens, the 20,000 that were above average, they were more well off. They had more, they were of a higher economic class. They could afford to participate. The 20,000 that were below average, well, they were the workers. They had to make a living. But ancient Athens still wanted them to participate. So to encourage them to participate, they would actually pay them. The government would pay them to come to their meetings. They would pay them to come participate in government. Starts off proposed legislation. We would have a council of 500 citizens that were drawn by lot. By lot simply means randomly, name out of a hat, however you want to call it. However you want to look at it. The purpose of this council was to propose legislation. Legislation could be amended or voted down before it was presented to the public. Once this step happens, we get to the decision-making process, gets to the public. So these proposed laws are passed on to something called the Assembly. The Assembly meets 40 times a year, so about once every 9 days. All citizens are free to attend, to debate, and to vote on legislation. Voting in the Assembly was done by a show of hands, and it was a simple majority rule, simple majority vote. Very, very easy to do. Athens, they actually had a trial system. They had a type of criminal justice system, so they held trials. Their judicial system, it consists of 6,000 jurors, once again drawn by lot, so randomly drawn. They serve a 1-year term. So you would go to where your local jury was headquartered, and you would have your trial. Not quite like the trials we have today, but they did have a judicial system. Trials back then, they lasted 1 day maximum. The accuser, you got up, you told your side of the story. The accused, they got up, they told their side of the story. Once you were done, the jury, they voted on it. There's no questions asked, there's no attorneys, there's no judges. They listen to your story, then they vote. The majority, which side, the accuser or the accused, whichever side got the majority votes from the jury, won. It was that simple. Political thinking. What is political thinking? Political thinking is simply critical thinking that is focused on what can reasonably be believed and then using this information to make political judgments. So once again, political thinking is simply critical thinking focused on what can reasonably be believed and then using this information to make political judgments. So we look at all the information given, and we decide A, is it true? And B, does it help us? So we have to apply this information to our particular set of circumstances. It's fairly easy. Do we do it? The answer is no, we don't. Why not? We see that there are obstacles to political thinking. There are actually 4 obstacles to political thinking. The first, simply, there is an unwillingness of citizens to make the effort. You must pay close attention to politics, and this is something most people refuse to do. They won't make any effort to pay attention, so we don't know what is going on. Second reason, while there is more news available, it is less trustworthy. What I mean by this, how many news sources are out there? If you're talking about free over-the-air news, ABC, NBC, CBS. If you're talking about cable news, MSNBC, Fox News, CNN. There's websites out there, magazines, there's various newspapers out there. And that's in the United States. I mean, we can go international too. The British Broadcasting Company, the BBC, it's actually a real good news channel. Al Jazeera is another news channel. So there's a lot of news stories out there, or a lot of news sources out there. They are competing with one another. They want to get you the news story first. So they're not going to actually care about the accuracy of their news story. They're going to want to get you the news first. And truthfully, news stories, they are slanted. We're going to see these media sources, they're going to slant information to fit their purposes, to fit their point of view, while it bears contradictory facts. The third reason, political leaders will attempt to spin their message. Much like news organizations, political leaders will attempt to spin their message. They will frame an issue in such a way that it benefits them while maybe not being 100% accurate. Finally, the fourth obstacle and the last obstacle to political thinking is simply, we don't like to hear opposing views. We prefer messages which conform to what we already believe in. I mean, and think about this. Do we like being told, no, you're wrong, you are incorrect in your assessment? No, we don't like being told that. So we prefer to listen to people or to listen to sources that are going to tell us, you're right, you are correct in how you see things. Political efficacy. Political efficacy is the public's belief that we have the ability to influence government and politics. So, political efficacy is the most important factor to a successful democracy. This belief that we have the ability to influence government and politics. Why do I say that this is the most important factor to a successful democracy? Well, first off, in a democracy, who participates? What do we need? Who do we need to participate? We need everybody to participate. Do we want power in the hands of 10 or power in the hands of tens of thousands? We should want power in the hands of tens of thousands. Now, this belief that we can influence government, when we vote, when we choose something, is the government always going to do it? No, they're not. For whatever reason, they are not always going to do what we want. But we need this belief that we can affect the government. Okay, they didn't do what we wanted this time, but next time they'll listen to us. Next time we will have an impact on government. Why do we need this belief? Why do we need this political efficacy? If we don't have this belief, if we believe that what we do doesn't matter, government's not going to pay attention, what is the encouragement for us to participate? Why are we going to continue to go participate? Why are we going to go continue to vote, to contact our representatives? We're not. And then we get that power in the hands of a few. So it is very important that everybody has political efficacy. Everybody has this belief that we can influence government. We see that Athens encouraged political efficacy by encouraging participation. What is needed for good political efficacy? What do we need to be able to make these good decisions? We need political knowledge. Citizens must use knowledge about issues, politicians, and the political process itself to identify the best way to act on their interest, as well as the limits to the government's power. Why do you yourself need to know this? Why can't you just trust others to tell you? Well, what did I just tell you about political thinking? News sources, politicians, they will slant this information to fit their agenda. You need to be able to gather information from various sources, peruse it, look through it, separate fact from fiction, lies from truth, and you need to be able to apply it to your situation and say, hey, this is good for me, or hey, this is bad for me. Don't trust anybody else to do this. So if you need this knowledge, this political knowledge, how can you gain political knowledge? Once again, the mainstream media, the over-the-air, the free news, ABC, NBC, CBS, cable news channels, CNN, MSNBC, CNN. You can listen to politicians. You can listen to talk radio shows. Talk to friends. Talk to neighbors. However, remember, you are going to have to pay attention, and you are going to have to make this final decision on whether or not it's true or false and how well it affects you. And even once you make your decision, you act accordingly. Please, 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 remember, it is important to realize that the government is going to do some things that the majority of people do not approve of. So what I mean by this is if you make the decision that's best for you, you act accordingly. The government still may act in a different manner that does not benefit you. But we still need that political efficacy. We still need that belief that, hey, next time they will listen. Continue to participate. Talking about government, so let's go. What is government? Government. Government comprises the institutions, the procedures through which a territory and its people are ruled. I don't like the word ruled. Let's go with government. Comprises the institutions and procedures through which a territory and its people are governed. Governed sounds so much better than ruled, doesn't it, guys? Knowledge of government, the rules of the game, how government operates, is essential. Does government affect our daily lives? Easy answer, yes. Harder question, how? How does government affect our daily lives? Well, think about this. I assume that you ate something today. Some of you took medication, you took vitamins, whatever. How do you know this stuff was safe for you to eat? The vitamins were safe for you to ingest. The medication was safe. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, run by the federal government, they tell us it's good for us. We know that our water has to have certain levels of chlorine, has to meet certain standards for it to be considered safe drinking water. If you drove, or whenever you drive, what gives you the ability to drive legally? It's a license that is issued to you. It is a privilege granted to you by state government. You drive on roads that are maintained by the state with state money, or some federal funds are used here. Electrical grids are created, they're protected, they're repaired by the federal government. Federal government, man, they're all up in our business. They are very, very nosy. Is government really needed? We could grow our own food. I mean, might be hard pressed to replace medication, but is government needed? Say I'm looking across and I pick out, say we don't have government, it doesn't exist, and I'm looking for somebody to volunteer. And I say, hey, John Doe, you're volunteering, you're being voluntold for this duty. Pick up a weapon and go patrol the 2,000-mile southern border of the United States. You can do this. I have faith in you. Can John do this by himself? No, he can't. No knock against John, it's just he doesn't have the ability. We see government is needed. Government provides the services or the public goods that we as individuals cannot provide for ourselves. So government is needed. Government is run by something called politics. So then my question is going to be, what is politics? Politics is simply having a say in what happens inside government. Remember when you were little and you were being taught how to write and write properly, and if you were writing a story, there were certain aspects, there were certain things you need to include in your story. We needed to include the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So the 5 W's and how. Remember that when you were little. Politics, making these decisions. We're going to take the 5 W's and how. So politics, having this say, we're going to decide who gets what, when they get it. We're going to have to decide why are they getting it. Where are we going to distribute this? Where are we giving them what they're getting? How are we going to do this? What is it? All this stuff, politics is making these decisions. It is the elected officials making these decisions. Have politics changed since the founding of the country? Yes, it has. Remember, this is going to sound very cynical. Once you become elected official, probably 90% of the time, you have one goal. What goal do you have as an elected official? Getting reelected, remaining an elected official. How do you do this? You remain an elected official by giving people what they want. You get reelected by giving people what they want. When we first become a country, I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and the answer for both questions is the same. Who could hold office? Who could vote? What's the answer? Really a simple answer. What's the answer? Anglo or white males. These were the only people who could hold office. These were the only people that could vote. So if you are an elected official, if you're a white male elected official, you want to remain a white male elected official, you need to serve the interest of the white male voting electorate. So far, so good? Easy? Yeah. The end of the Civil War, 1860s. Slavery is abolished. African American males are now given the right to vote. So now our elected officials, they have to consider what Anglo males want, but they also have to consider what African American males want, because now they also have the power to vote. They have the power to put you in or take you out of office. Ladies, 1920, what happens? 19th Amendment was ratified. Women get the right to vote. So now our elected officials, they're now paying attention to Anglo males, African American males, and now they have to pay attention to what women want. 1924, the first ones that were here, but the last ones invited to the party. Who am I talking about? Native Americans. 1924, Native Americans are finally given the right to vote. So have politics changed since the founding of the country? Yes. Politics changes every time somebody else wins the right to participate. It changes every time some other group gains the right to vote. Have politics changed in any other way? 1924 was the last time we saw a segment of society. We actually saw people gain the right to vote. But in the 1940s, we start to see the creation of lobbyists, special interest groups, PACs, political action committees, that these start to have influence on our elected officials. They start to pay attention to what these groups want. So yes, it has changed with the creation of lobbyists, interest groups, political action committees, that kind of thing. The identity of America, race and immigration. When we start settling America, starting with the 13 colonies, we all pretty much get along. Why? We are very homogenous. Homogenous means the same. Think about it. Where are we from? Europe is only partially correct because we can get a little bit more specific. We're all from England or Great Britain, however you want to refer to it. So this means that we look alike, we talk alike, we have the same belief system, we have the same traditions. We are very homogenous. Homogenous means the same. Let's be honest. If we're in a group of people, are we more comfortable in a homogenous group, a group of people that's like us, or are we more comfortable in a diverse group? Most of us are more comfortable in a homogenous group, in a group that looks like us. So when we first become a nation, when we're settling the 13 colonies and we fought our War of Independence, we become a nation, most of the people are from England. We are a homogenous citizenship. However, after the war, starting in the early 1800s, we start to see increased immigration from the rest of Europe, France, Ireland, Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia. And we, the original citizenship, the English descendants, we start going crazy. We are feeling threatened by these new immigrants. They don't look like us. They don't talk like us. They might not have the same belief system. They have different traditions, different types of food. So we start complaining to Congress. 1840s, 1850s, West Coast. we see this new addition to immigration, and the English descendants lose their ever-loving mind. Which group am I talking about? Who's immigrating to the West Coast? The Asians, particularly the Chinese. Now, we have all these Chinese that are immigrating to California. You know, at least if you're in Europe, you can say you have some common background. But if you're European, is there any common background with you and the Chinese? Nope, not at all. Different language, different food, traditions, religion, it's totally different. We are going nuts. We are feeling threatened. So we complained to Congress. Congress, in an effort to soothe our fears, we actually start to pass laws limiting immigration. The big one was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. This is going to limit the number of Chinese immigrants to the United States. Was immigration hurting America back then? No, it wasn't. There's nothing wrong with it. But this was a popular fear that we got the government to look at. And this fear, it actually lasted for a while. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, it was in force, it was in place, it was enforced, and it was finally repealed, finally done away with, the Magnuson Act of 1943. So we had this fear of Chinese immigration for 61 years. 1965, Congress lifts all additional restrictions on Asian and Latino immigrants. As a result of immigration from other countries, we see that the United States has become older, more urbanized, and more religiously diverse. Let me go back. Quick question. Oh, that was not what I wanted to do. There we go. Does immigration still cause political strife today? Is this still a political issue today? Yes, it is. We still have issues with immigrants from other portions of the world. Okay, now we can move on. America is built on ideals and values. There's one consistent throughout the history of the United States, and this is the ideals or the values that America is built on. And there's three of them. The first is liberty. Americans believe liberty is freedom from government control. It is associated with both personal and economic freedom. The second value or ideal is democracy. Democracy is the idea of popular sovereignty. That is spelled S-O-V-E-R-E-I-G-N-T-Y. S-O-V-E-R-E-I-G-N-T-Y. This is the notion that political authority rests in the hands of the people. Okay, question. Political authority rests in the hands of the people, but we have an indirect democracy. How does this work? How do we have this belief that we, the people, are the final authority if we elect people to make these decisions for us? We believe this. The key word there is elect. If our elected officials are not acting in the manner that we find appropriate, if they are not acting in our best interest, well, during the next election, we have two options. We can re-elect them, or we can elect somebody new. What do? We elect somebody new. This is why we buy the decisions they make, is because we elected them to make these decisions. But B, if we're unhappy with them, we can always replace them. The third ideal is equality. Equality, this is not a difficult concept to explain, but it is kind of mixed up. So there's different types of equality and different definitions. So I'm going to start off with this one. Equality generally means equality of opportunity. People can use their own talents to succeed, versus equality of results. This would be affirmative action. So equality generally means equality of opportunity. People can use their own talents to succeed, versus equality of results, affirmative action. Equality of opportunity. You're in class. What's the highest grade everybody in here can make? Highest grade's an A. Whether you make that A is based on what? On how hard you work, on how much effort you put into it. That is equality of opportunity. Equality of results. Man, I want a perfect bell curve. I want to have the same number of A's and F's, the same number of B's and D's, same number of C's. So I might do a bell curve. I'm going to need 5 A's, 5 F's, 7 B's, 7 D's, and 14, 24. And let's do 14 C's. So I am going to give somebody, they're going to make an A even though they don't deserve it. I am going to base this decision based on something beyond their control. If you are one of the ones that are benefiting from equality of results, that's great for you. For those A's, what if I just took the top 5 grades? Once again, this is only an example. This is not happening. You are earning your grade. But what if I just took the top 5 A's? Well, what if you're number 6, man? How do you feel? Why didn't I take 6? Actually, if you make a 93 and everybody else is an 85 or below, how do you feel? Man, you worked hard for your A. Why is everybody else getting one? We do not like equality of results. So that's the first example of equality. The second example, 2 more different types of equality. Americans tend to believe more in political equality. So this is the right to participate equally in politics, more than social equality. Equal access to money, equal access to social opportunities. So we believe more in the right to participate in politics, vote, have political discussions, political discourse, even run for office, than we do in social equality. Have this equal access to money and social opportunities.